that I'm very sorry and I apologize for the inconvenience of me not giving up.
Hello everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new in-shop video in which we are going to talk about the Helsing, which is available in the shop, but not in direct purchase, but instead in bundles, as you can see right there, with 5% chances of drop chance. I'm not going to talk about either the tank is worth it or not for the money, because it all depends on your luck on crates, but I would rather talk about the tank generally, you know, so you have an idea of how to perform with this tank and is it a good tank for you or not. So, for those of you who already unlocked the Annihilator, because I think by now the event is nearly over for everybody, so you should be able to get it. The Helsing has the same mechanism concerning the gun. You shoot one time and 2 shots are gonna come out, not 3 like the Annihilator. Which means your first shot is gonna go straight where you're aiming, because your gun dispersion is not bad. I mean, you have 0.32, so you should be fine. But the problem is the second shot. The second shot is going in without you being able to aim. So most of the time it's gonna be one shot going in and the second one going a little bit on the left or the right, but not directly where you were aiming. It's not really a problem with the Helsing, as your gun dispersion allows you to still put the majority of your shots straight in, but you need to be aware of that when you're playing with this gun. Now, everything is perfect about this gun if we forget about this. You have an amazing DPM, an amazing reload time, an amazing reload between shots of only 0.25 seconds. The average penetration is good, honestly, for tier 7, 170 with regular shells, 220 with a PCR. The average damage is good as well, 200 with regular, 170 with your APCR. But what I love about this tank, and I'm gonna tell you why, it's the HE. You have 300 with your HE, but it's 300 multiplied by 2 as you're shooting 2 shells. Whereas some tanks, for example, if we take the Helsing gun, you have 200. But you have 200 twice, which means your overall alpha is 400. If we were playing, for example, a regular 400 alpha damage tank, for example, let me take maybe the Lupus, you're gonna see that you have 400 alpha damage, but when it comes to high explosive shell, you will only have 515 average damage with your HE. Whereas with the Helsing, you go to 600, which makes the HEs on this tank, if you manage to penetrate all of them at the same time, an extremely effective shell to play on this tank. Now, and another thing that is a little bit boring about the Helsing is probably its gun depression. Only 6 degrees is not a lot, regarding the fact that the tank is quite high if you compare it with other tank destroyers of the same tier. So be careful with this tank not to play on too hilly terrains. Now, maybe we could talk a little bit about the armor profile, or you know what, I'm gonna do that after. We'll talk about the armor later on during this replay. The only thing I need to tell you about the turret is that you have a fully traversable one, which makes it quite versatile, and that's why I love that tank. If you combine that with an amazing mobility, which allows you to go to nearly 45 kilometers per hour, and therefore having better mobility than your average medium at tier 7, it makes this tank extremely good at relocating, and therefore a great tank if you already know how to play that game. Now, for the turn rate, it sucks. The ult turn rate is good, but the turret turn rate sucks even more. You only have 20 degrees per second, but hey, you're a tank destroyer and you already have a fully traversable turret. I think it's enough to ask from the Helsing. Now, before going into the armor profile, because there are a lot of things to say, I just want to show you the equipments real quick. First, I go for the calibrated shell. I don't know why I had improved ventilation, but I play with calibrated shell to improve a little bit everything there, the armor piercing, everything. After, I go for the enhanced gun lane drive. By the way, you could also use the improved ventilation, to be fair. You can use whatever you want. You have the choice, really. But in my case, I would rather go for the calibrated shell. After, I go for the enhanced gun lane drive to reduce my aim time a little bit, to make me a little bit more effective on the battlefield. And finally, vertical stabilizer, because with this tank, I'm gonna shoot a lot while being in movement, because as I told you, with this tank, you go extremely fast. After, for the vitality, I go for the defense system, because I'm not gonna ram anybody. After, I go for the improved assembly, because your armor is trollish, but trollish because of the angle, not because of how thick it is. After, I go for the toolbox because the repair track is worthless. I go for the improved optics because with this tank I'm gonna play it more like a medium than a regular tank destroyer. After, I go for the improved control to improve a little bit my ult turn rate because you have enough mobility, you don't really need to go for the engine accelerator, you would rather have more turn rate to avoid being circled. And finally, I am consumable because as I told you, you have a really fast reload time, and therefore if you put the high-end consumable, it's gonna make it way easier for you to penetrate, to use adrenaline for a longer period of time, and therefore penetrate more your enemies. That's pretty much the tank for y'all. Now let's go into Armor Inspector to see what this tank is capable of in terms of bouncing shells. The armor profile on this tank is a little bit different than what you're used to into World of Tanks Blitz, because here you're not gonna bounce shots because of your armor, but because of how angled your armor is. Let me explain real quick. Here is your weak spot. You have 3 weak spots, I would say. This part here, the upper part of the hull right here between the gun and the hull, but also the whole turret, as long as we're not talking about the purple part, which is the gun mantlet. Now, what is troll about this tank is that your gun mantlet is quite big. Therefore, when you poke around the corner showing only your turret, there are a lot of chances that the shells will go into your gun mantlet. If it's the case, it's gonna be an auto bounce. Trust me, nobody will penetrate that area. It's impossible, especially at tier 8 and even at tier I was about to say tier 9, but who cares, you're not gonna encounter them. So that's pretty much the gun mantlet for you, which is quite trollish. Now the second part that is troll about the tank, but you need to angle it, it's this part right there. Here, this little plate is extremely angled, as you can see right there, and if you manage to poke around the corner showing it angled like this, it's nearly impossible for your enemies to penetrate. Now for the rest of the tank, it's literally paper. Everybody will go through. Don't try to side scrape, don't try this kind of stuff, because you're literally paper. So your only way to actually be able to bounce shots with this tank is probably poking around the corner in peekaboo and hoping for the shot to go into your gun mantlet and not on the side of your turret, which are quite exposed and easy to penetrate. Now, concerning the playstyle, it's simple when you have knowledge on maps, and it's quite hardcore when you are a beginner. All you gotta do is play aggressively from an hold down position from which you are gonna peekaboo. To make myself clear, you need to take advanced positions, so basically use your mobility to spot the enemies before they allow themselves to be in the right position. Doing that, you need to find a position from which you show only your turret and especially your gun mantlet, and to make sure that they will shoot at your gun mantlet and not at the rest of your turret, which is quite easily penetrable. You need to poke around the corner, shoot as fast as possible, and go back to your position like I did with the SU here. And here you have a perfect example of those 3 things I talk about combined. As you can see right there, I played aggressively, which allowed me to spot the SU-152 for the rest of my team. I poked around to sneak my 2 shots and going back as soon as possible, resulting in the SU-152 getting completely destroyed without being able to do anything. And the cool thing about playing the tank this way is that doing that you will have really fast games, simply because when you spot for your team is gonna trust you and they're gonna advance. You can see right there, if I did not play it aggressively on the SU, it would have taken ages before pushing, because let's face it, we all know random players in this game don't try anything when it comes to losing HP, which is a shame, because that's how you actually become good into this game, knowing when to sacrifice your HPs. And that's why I have to do all the job, but here it's not a problem, because even if I have to do all the job with my HP, I can still do all the job as well with my DPM, because 2.6k DPM at tier 7, oh boy, is it some crazy DPM we got there. So we take in another position from which we can just show our gun mantlet and hoping to get some sneaky shots. Here we go, against the T-29, as you can see I'm moving around. Why am I moving around? To make it hardcore and harder for him to penetrate my turret. With this tank, that's the only thing you need to understand when you're in all down. You need to move from time to time to allow your enemies to bounce your gun mantlet. If you don't do that, you will have bad games with the Helsing. And for the moment, as you can see, we are keeping our HPs not because we are camping, because we are in the first line and we're spotting for the rest of our lives. We are keeping our HPs because we are playing it the right way, by circling, going over, etc, etc. Here, the only shot I took that was a lucky shot ended up in my gun mantlet, and as I told you, it's impossible to penetrate, and I think it was the Leo. In my opinion, that was the Leo. Here, I don't really need to push. I can't push, because even if you are good in all down from sniping positions, like it's the case right now, when it comes to facing frontal tanks, it becomes really hard for the Helsing to manage to win. That's why we stay in the back there, even if the VK died in the process. That's a price to pay, you know. And of course, sometimes you're gonna get frustrating shots like the one I just had with the Tiger 1, where the first one penetrates because 0.32 is actually a really good accuracy, but the second one, as you're not fully aimed on your target, is gonna end up in the ground. But hey, I'm glad Wargaming made the second shot having that much bad gun dispersion, because if they didn't do that, this tank would be even more broken than it already is. And I want to remind you, just for the record, that this tank got nerfed in the past. It got nerfed on mobility before it can. If I remember correctly, this tank went from 55 to 45 kilometers per hour, and they reduced the turn rate because it was way too broken. It was an hybrid between a medium tank and a tank destroyer, which made the Helsing one of the greatest tanks, even better than the Dracula in the good old days. Now the only one remaining is the CRV. As you can see, I have a broken engine. I'm not gonna make it. Just for the record, I'm gonna repair my engine even if it's useless. And we end up the game with 2 kills and nearly 5,000 damage. That's the Helsing for you all. If you want to play correctly, do not forget the most important part is to show your gun mantlet only from hull down positions, and if you do that, you should be able to get some pretty good ace tankers. Hope you enjoyed. If that's the case, feel free to subscribe, like and share, and I'm gonna see you soon for probably a new stream, video, or I don't know, we will see. See ya guys.